Welcome, everyone, to another Zeteo Town Hall, live town hall. I'm delighted to be joined by one of the world's best-known leftist public intellectuals, Yanis Varoufakis, former finance minister of Greece, founder of the Democracy in Europe movement, and best-selling author, most recently of the book Techno-Feudalism, What Killed Capitalism. Yanis, welcome to Zeteo.
It's wonderful to be here with you, Mehdi. Thanks so much.
No, it's great to. I was just saying to you before we started the town hall, just tell our subscribers, it's weird that we haven't spoken before. I'm looking forward to this conversation. So much to cover. And let me give flag, as usual, to our subscribers who are joining the Zoom call. I've got my laptop here. Do stick your questions in the Q&A, and I'll try and come to as many as I can. I won't be able to get through all of them, but we'll try and put as many of your questions or comments to Yanis. But Yanis, I'm going to kick us off by asking about your fascinating book that I urge everyone to read. Explain the premise of your most recent book, because it feels very topical, very timely. It's called Techno-Feudalism, What Killed Capitalism. Explain the premise behind the book. Are you saying that the big tech CEOs, in your view today, are more like feudal lords than CEOs in a free market?
Exactly. And the linchpin of my argument is that capital became so triumphant. It steamrolled over us, the left, over the trade unions movements, over liberal democracy. And like a rather idiotic virus that became too lethal for its own boots, it killed off its host. So it was capital that overthrew capitalism, which is a delicious contradiction, of course. And at the same time, the predicament that we're facing, because what Elon Musk, and not so much Elon Musk, but Jeff Bezos, more so than Elon Musk, and Google, and all these platforms in China as well, Alibaba and Baidu and so on, what they have, which Henry Ford, Thomas Edison didn't have, is this new form of mutated capital, which are called cloud capital, because Mehdi, all forms of capital hitherto have been produced means of production. Whether it was a plow or a tractor or an industrial robot, is a machine that we built to build other to do other things with it, to produce either machines or food or whatever. Produced means of production. But what lives inside your tablet, your phone, your computer, through the optic fiber cables and the server farms and so on, is a new form of capital which produces nothing except for the power to manipulate our behavior, to modify our behavior. And anyone who owns that is a capitalist who owns that particular form of capital, let's call them cloudalists or cloud capitalists or techno-feudal lords, they have a power that Henry Ford could never have dreamt of. And therefore, by replacing markets with cloud thieves or digital platforms like Amazon, they are replacing profit, capitalist profit, with a new form of rent, like the old feudal lords, the landed gentry, extracted ground rent from everyone, from artisans, from peasants, and so on. These people extract what I call cloud rent. So they have essentially, without realizing it, well, there was no conspiracy, no plan here. It simply evolved in the same way that capitalism evolved out of feudalism. There was no conspiracy there either. They have created a new system, which I call techno-feudalism.
You say in the book, somebody killed capitalism. We have something worse. Who is that somebody? Is it a person, an ideology, a group, or is it just technology itself?
No, it's capital. It's capital. In the same way that, as I said, there was no democratic decision or not even a conspiracy of very few people back in the 18th century to bring out capitalism from feudalism. It simply evolved as a result of technological change in navigation, the creation of the steam engine, the enclosures in Britain, and so on, that brought about this transformation of society whereby once upon a time under in the feudal age, power came out of land ownership, and it came in the form of rent, of ground rent. But by the 19th century, especially the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, it was ownership of the machines, of capital, that allowed you to have this new form of wealth creation or wealth extraction, profit. And now we moved from capital and profit to cloud capital and a new form of cloud rent.
And we are the serfs in that model, as you say in the book. We're getting some questions in the chat from subscribers, and thank you to Zeteo subscribers for joining the town hall. Stefan Schmidt says, I'm delighted that you invited Yanis Varoufakis. His history is inspiring. He also asks, in his theory on techno-feudalism, he doesn't appear to include the even bigger danger to the serfs by the cloudalists, which is AI. He says AI now poses the real danger of making elections irrelevant as it can flood the zone and target individuals with misinformation. What's your response to Stefan? Liking this video? Then don't just watch, hit like, share and subscribe and tap the bell so you never miss a video or live show. But if you want early access to exclusive content, then you have to head to Zeteo.com and subscribe now. You'll be supporting fearless, independent journalism.
Well, Stefan, I don't believe that there is such a thing as AI. AI is a marketing term. Technically, if you look at it, the evolution of what used to be cybernetics, if you recall, back in the 1960s, into machine learning, that happened a long time before we even talked about AI. AI is a marketing term. It really doesn't mean much, except if you want to think of it in terms of ChatGPT. But the work of the techno-feudal lords had already been done well before OpenAI produced this silly little bot that allows you to plagiarize in newfangled ways. You know, what Google, think of the Amazon algorithm, which has been around well before you and I have been waxing lyrical or not so lyrical about AI. It has been doing something absolutely magnificent and horrible at the same time. It has been training us through Alexa, through its interface. Every time you like something, a book, a bicycle, whatever on Amazon, you're training it to train you, to train it, to train you, to train it, to train you, to train it to know you well, so that it gives you good book recommendations and electric bicycle recommendations, win over your trust. And then once it does that, it does something remarkable, something that no capital could ever do in the past. It can input desires into your bosom. It can make you want stuff, and you trust it to do it because it has given you good advice in the past. And then once you have that desire, it can satiate your desire by selling the stuff directly to you outside of any market, because Amazon is not a market, right? It's a trading platform, but it is a completely hierarchical, top-down organization that resembles more the Soviet system. So
that gives Jeff Bezos a power like no oligarch before. If you're saying he can input desires into our chests,
exactly, he can bypass markets. He actually bypasses markets. He uses Amazon in order to destroy markets, in order to make sure that even the capitalists who exploit labor in the standard way that Karl Marx described so beautifully, even they are vassals to Bezos, because, you know, he charges them 40%. So in the end, the capitalist profit is not even retained by the capitalist. It goes to the cloud capitalist, to the tech lord. And, you know, this has repercussions. Even you may be watching and say, well, I don't care because I don't use Amazon. It doesn't matter. Because when you have around, this is my estimate, 30% of total income being siphoned off the circular flow of income, and it goes into the pockets of the Jeff Bezoses of the world. You know, that money never comes back to the circular flow of income. So that means that aggregate demand for goods and services in the United States and Canada and Europe and so on, shrinks. Because it's out of the circular flow of income, which means that the Fed has to print more dollars in order to, you know, maintain the level of economic activity that is inflationary. So even if you have an old Nokia phone and you are never part of this cloud capital world, your life is detrimentally affected.
So on that note, you say in the book that we have had powerful and influential oligarchs before, especially here in the US, Rockefeller, the Koch brothers. But what do you think makes an Elon Musk in particular so different right now to a Henry Ford or a Rockefeller? What makes him so particularly uniquely influential and, I would argue, dangerous?
The capital that they own. Because think about it, Henry Ford, right? I mean, he was an egomaniac. He was quite fascistic in his
anti-Semite, yeah.
Anti-Semite. He was ruthless. He was absolutely. He bought a newspaper, I believe the Dearborn something, in order to influence politics. He influenced municipal politics. He made sure that the streetcars would be ripped out so that, you know, his own buses and cars and trucks would dominate the roads. So in that sense, he sounds very much like Elon Musk, doesn't he? Except that he wanted you to buy something that was rolling off his production lines, his own traditional produced means of production. He wanted you to buy the stuff that his factory made, which his workers built, and which those workers could also buy with credits from Ford. Now, when it comes to Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk through Twitter in particular, right? They don't want you to buy anything that they produce. They simply have this form of capital which allows them direct access to your brain. They don't have to go through the municipality, through the newspaper. I mean, Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post, but that's a hobby, more or less. He's got his algorithm, which is hardwired now into your brain through Alexa and all the wire services that he has. So that is a profound difference between those folks and Henry Ford or Thomas Edison. But allow me, Mehdi, to just add that one thing. Until Musk purchased Twitter, and a lot of people were surprised that he would do that. He would pay, what, 44 billion, whatever. It was peanuts for him. For him, it was essential to buy Twitter because up until then, he was a traditional, old-fashioned capitalist. He made stuff. He made cars. And, rockets. I mean, very interesting and, loud stuff. But it was still very much in the tradition of the old pedestrian capital as produced means of production. He needed to enter the world of cloud capital, and Twitter allowed him to do that. And what he saw in Twitter, and that's quite brilliant on his behalf, brilliant and evil at the same time. He saw an opportunity to create an everything app, an app that is hardwired into our brains and which potentially allows him to create his own payment system that bypasses Wall Street. So, Henry Ford would never have imagined any of that.
Yeah, and of course, Musk, the only good thing about him buying Twitter, the only good thing is he kind of revealed himself for being the kind of neo-fascist bigot amplifier that he is. And he's actually turned a lot of people off, both with Twitter and his cars. In Europe, Tesla sales have taken a hit. In the US, not so much. Right-wingers are stepping into the gap. But I think to be the everything app, you need everyone on there. And Amazon, whatever you think about Jeff Bezos, only recently as he started pissing people off politically, he kind of kept his head down for the first 10, 20 years of his career. Musk has pissed off a lot of people, which is a good thing, I would argue. He's revealed himself to be the partisan right-winger that some of us always knew he was. Vinny Di Stefano asks, Yanis, with the unbelievable power that the new feudal overlords possess, what can we as serfs do to upset this system to bring beneficial change to the overwhelming majority around the world?
Here I'm going to give you a very old-fashioned answer. Ever since Marx pointed out the manner in which capitalism, the accumulation of capital, is detrimental to the interest of society as a whole, even to capitalists, because in the end they become sad bastards because the only thing they worry about and they can't sleep at night and they lose their soul is that they will go bankrupt if they don't squeeze the living daylights out of their proletarian labor, because if they don't, somebody else will, and they will get bankrupt. Ever since Marx highlighted the collective madness that is capitalism, the answer to the question is, well, the machines are not the problem. The machines can liberate us to the extent that they can do chores that we don't like doing much faster and better and allow us to, read poetry and listen to music and do whatever. The solution, and therefore the answer to your question, is the socialization of the means of production. These machines should belong to all of us so that we can all share in the fruits of their labor. So the machines become our slaves, not we, their slaves. And therefore, I just extend this. I'm not against having cloud capital. Cloud capital is brilliant. I don't have a problem with AI. The question is, who owns it? And
so you are of the view that the big tech companies should be treated more like public utilities?
Indeed. And let me give you an example. Why doesn't, you're in Washington, D.C., I'm in Athens, why can't our municipalities own their own algorithm, their own cloud capital? So instead of having Uber and Airbnb and, use Bank of America or Citigroup payment applications, why can't our municipality provide local coders with the opportunity to write beautiful code for the municipality, and we citizens of our districts, of our towns, who can, through a democratic process, decide, let's say the equivalent publicly owned Airbnb, how many weeks or months a year we want houses and flats and apartments to be rented so that we don't have the complete devastation of the housing sector. Why should the taxi drivers that use these apps today for Uber, who get skinned by Uber, absolutely skinned, and whose life is not worth living as a result of the private ownership of the Uber algorithm. Why can't that be municipally owned? And the application for the equivalent of Uber, the public version of it, can be optimized so that we minimize traffic congestion and optimize, the incomes of taxi drivers.
You know very well, because you've been in the arena having these fights even longer than I have. You know very well the capitalist, the free marketer would say in response, there's a very simple answer to your question. Why can't the municipalities run it? Because we came up with it. We're the ones doing the innovation, taking the risks, not the state.
Well, you didn't, mate, is the answer. Every single technology, if you take, my phone, for instance, right? Whatever brand it is, every single technology in here, from the touch screen to the Wi-Fi to the microchip,
State
to
subsidized.
everything in it, was developed by some government grant. All you did was you managed to put together the work of others that was publicly funded. You see, that is a common fallacy that is motivated, of course. It's a motivated spin by the oligarchs. They like to present the world in which we live as one that is populated by all these beautiful artifacts that are privately produced, and then the bad state comes or the public, and socializes them or taxes them. No, it's exactly the opposite. Everything of value we've ever produced is collectively manufactured, collectively invented, and then those with power privatize it.
I remember reading Mariana Mazzucato's The Entrepreneurial State, where she goes into depth about the iPhone and how it comes out of Pentagon research spending and all of that. Fascinating stuff. Okay, let me ask you, I just want to revert back to Elon Musk before I go back to some of our questions. I do want to get your take. What do you make of Musk as a character, as someone on the left who has studied capitalists and oligarchs and billionaires and jousted with them for many years in your political career, in your career as an intellectual? What do you make of Musk? Because he claims to be this pioneer. He wants to build a civilization in Mars, he says, wants to save free speech, he says, even though right now he's censoring Turkish opposition accounts on Twitter, and he's done the same in India and other places. What do you make of Musk and the myth of Musk?
Well, I think there's a lot of myth involved in it. And I never personalized my political campaigns. If it wasn't Musk, it would have been somebody else. Indeed, I think that Musk is the least interesting and least influential of the tech roles. He's the loudest. He's the one that has a White House with Doge, and he wreaks havoc, federal government, and so on. But he's not the most significant of the tech lords. Peter Thiel is a more dangerous individual than Elon Musk. And I think that Jeff Bezos is the most powerful of them all. If you look at the extent of cloud capital that he possesses. And if anything, Elon Musk has produced some things of value. Like, for instance, I wouldn't be talking to you if it wasn't for Starlink. And I don't want to advertise Starlink. The only reason why I have it, I'll tell you why I have it, is because I live here in Athens, very close to the American embassy. And because of who I am, I wouldn't have access to the internet if I didn't have Starlink.
Okay. That's a new one.
So, but allow me you said something earlier, which I agree with, and I'll take it a bit further. You said, and I think very succinctly, that, at least Elon Musk, by buying into Twitter and becoming engulfed in the Trumpist campaign, he has revealed that he's a fascist. And that we should welcome, because it is important to have clarity about who these people are. But I'm going to go a bit further. These techno-feudal lords, including Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, maybe so Peter Thiel, have exposed the great lie of liberal democracy, of liberal capitalism. Peter Thiel has explicitly said something with which I agree entirely. He said that capitalism and democracy are incompatible. He's completely correct on this.
But he prefers the capitalism side of that, and you prefer the democracy.
He wants capitalism without democracy, which means fascism. Okay, but at least we can agree on that. What I really cannot stand is all this soft rightist defense of conglomerate power, on the basis that, it is a powerful good and it can become even green. Remember all that rubbish about the green transition coming out of the voluntary transformation of ExxonMobil into a green tech company, that's when I would lose my will to live. When I have somebody like Peter Thiel and like Elon Musk, who are clearly children of South African apartheid, who are clearly pursuing to, without limits, the white supremacist logic. This is why they are supporting apartheid in Israel. This is why they are so morbidly monospheric and patriarchal and chauvinistic and utterly sexist. They are clear. They come clean on this, and you can face them. You can respect them as in the same way that you would respect Mussolini in the battlefields of Europe in the 1940s, and fight it out.
Although Mussolini probably had a better sense of humor than Elon Musk and Peter Thiel. Let me ask you this. Bo Leclerc asks in the Q&A, one of our subscribers, Yanis, why has the left been unable to provide an exciting vision of the future since the fall of the Soviet Union? Your book seems to be the only one I've seen that's doing that.
Well, it's not true. The left has produced remarkable figures from time immemorial. Think of William Morris. Letters from nowhere. Think of Noam Chomsky. Think of Edward Said, the great Palestinian writer.
No, I think the question was specifically about since the end of the Cold War, the vision for the future, a post-Cold War leftist vision for the future.
Well, 1991 was a major defeat for all of us, independently of whether you supported the Soviet Union or not. Because the collapse of the Soviet Union was the end. It was the death of the communist movement, at least in Europe and the United States. It was very difficult to defend yourself being a communist because the Soviet people did not get out into the streets to defend the workers' Soviet Republic. So how could we defend it? But then something else happened. Social Democrats, or in the United States, New Dealers, went to ground as well. Because with the conversion of traditional capitalism into financialized capitalism, the center of gravity shifted away from industry towards the banking sector, with the exorbitant and exuberance of the financial sector, which led, of course, to capitalism's own Waterloo in 2008. But between 1991 and 2008, you had this blancmange of a theory, of an ideology that, it's a new paradigm, and financialization is going to make everyone rich, and and the world has become a global village, and everybody's going to get better off, and poverty has been eliminated. And that what was going on, however, during that period was that with the center of gravity shifting from industry to finance, it was impossible to have a New Deal. It was impossible to have a social democracy because the New Deal, Roosevelt, LBJ in the United States, or Harold Wilson and Willy Brandt and Bruno Kreisky, the social democrats in Europe, their job was to play the role of the referee, to sit the captains of industry on one side of the table and the trade unions on the other and cut a deal between them. But when power shifted away from the industrial captains and to the bankers, it was impossible to do that. So social democracy went to ground itself. And then when we had a few opportunities to rise up after the demise of capitalism, the major defeat of capitalism in 2008, what did we do? I was part of this, and this is self-criticism. We went to New York and we occupied Wall Street, and we spent 5 hours discussing whether we should sell sandwiches from the canteen in the middle of the occupation. And the Wall Street bankers used that time in order to reconfigure the policy and to rebuild their power. Then when
with taxpayer cash.
Yes, indeed, of course, with $35,000 billion of it, might be. 35 trillion, that was quantitative easing. Now, when we, and that again is self-critical, when the people of Greece gave us a remarkable opportunity in 2015, and let me just make this point, we were a party of 4% in 2009, right?
The Syriza.
Yes, 4%. By January 2015, the very conservative, very, very careful, reluctant for radical change people of Greece took us from 4% to 36%. We were in government for five months We fought against financialized capital, against the troika, against the creditors and so on. Okay, and when we called the referendum, when they sought their support in that struggle, they took us from 36% to 62%. And my prime minister on that night surrendered, yeah, essentially defected to the financialized cabal. And then, of course, people turn around and say, excuse the French, bugger off. You know, we are not going to take you seriously anymore. So, you know, when it's like a surfer, if you miss the big wave, you have to struggle in the cold waters until the next one comes, hoping that you will be ready for the next one.
And that takes me where I wanted to take this conversation, because we're almost running out of time already. It's already 1:30. But I do want to ask about the rise of the far right, which is one of the big political developments of the current era, certainly of this part of my lifetime, where you have, you know, in the wake of the financial crash, the left doesn't benefit. As you say, logically, you might think capitalism failed. It's the moment for the left. Instead, the right comes roaring back. In the UK, when I lived in the UK, it was the Conservative-led coalition government that comes in 2010, defeats Labour, brings in crazy austerity, which has reduced the UK basically to a poor country today. Now you have the rise of far-right parties, hard-right parties in places like Finland and Italy and Czech Republic, Hungary, Croatia, EU countries that have hard-right parties in government, either alone or in coalition. In places like the UK, France, Germany, right-wing parties are on the rise. You've seen the AfD in Germany with Musk's backing, Reform Party in the UK. When you see the rise of the far right, how much do you blame, I'm going to ask it in two parts, the left/center left? Like, has the left provided a, you know, is there a bulwark against fascism, or have center left parties in particular, whether it's the Democrats in the US, Labour in the UK, in France, Macron and co., have they basically not been a viable alternative, and that's what's let the far right rise up?
It is entirely the fault of the center left. The center left is responsible for the rise of fascism. It was the case in the 1920s and 30s. It is the case against today. In the 1920s, remember Ramsay MacDonald? Who was it that espoused on behalf of the working class the process of austerity that crushed the British working class well before the Second World War? It was a Labour government, the first Labour government under Ramsay MacDonald. Similarly, who was it that unleashed the evil, dark forces of the City of London? It was Gordon Brown together with Tony Blair. It was the center left. Who created Trump? Obama. Obama was elected at the end of 2008. You know, this yes we can business. What was it that he said we can do? Put the financial genie back into the bottle and look after the victims of Wall Street. He did exactly the opposite. The first thing he did when he entered the White House, he employed Larry Summers and Tim Geithner with a remit to save the bankers while imposing harsh austerity on the vast majority of the Americans under the ideology of a stimulus that was a figment of his imagination. And therefore, you've got discontent. And when the left is responsible for, you know, siding with the, you know, effectively with the bankers, and the capitalists caused the crisis and the discontent, you know, the center left becomes their lackey. And then this discontent grows beyond control.
So,
and then a Mussolini, a Hitler, an Orban, a Trump, a Le Pen stands on a soapbox and says, give me absolute power and I'm going to get them and I'm going to make you proud again. So, you know, this is the sad fact. And now allow me just to add one more note. Look, power has a lure that requires basic ethical standards in order to be able to resist it. Mehdi, when I in my first week as finance minister, in that, you know, very exceptional time when the people of Greece put somebody like me in that position to negotiate with the IMF and Washington and Brussels and so on, it was remarkable how well trained the representatives of these financial institutions and the creditors and big capital, how well trained they are to lure you in. I remember a discussion with Christine Lagarde, who was then the managing director of the International Monetary Fund, who really startled me because, you know, I was there ready to give her all my arguments as to why this harsh austerity was killing our people and it was killing our economy and it was really not even good for our creditors. And she stopped me when we were just the two of us. And she said, Yanis, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. What we have done in your country is indefensible. It can't work. It can't work. Do you hear that? It can't work. Not that it's difficult to make it work. It can't work. So suddenly I felt, my God, my work has been done. And then she added, but Yanis, you have to know that we have invested so much into this. We can't go back. And your credibility and career, she was telling me as a friend, depends on you coming on board.
Going along with it. Wow.
It's very easy to convince yourself, not that you're a bad guy and that you're going to betray your people, but that, look, if I go along with them, then, okay, it will be bad for my people, but if it's me implementing these policies, I will do some good as well. So it's really, there's nothing easier than fooling yourself that by betraying the left, you are doing the left's job. And this is why people like Obama, I'm not saying that they were evil people that wanted to go into the White House in order to destroy the American working class and bring Trump to the White House. No, but this is effectively what they did.
Yeah. No, it's a very fair description of that, the allure of power. Ayaz Malik asks, fascism is creeping into our system of government. It's no longer an assumption. How will it, or will it, end?
My good friend, this is the beauty and the ugliness of the human condition. No one knows. It is unknowable. We are not pundits. You and I are not sitting here watching the weather and trying to predict it. Because unlike the weather, who doesn't give a damn about our predictions, the outcome of social movements, of human endeavors, is the result of human endeavors. So you and I, it's up to us to shape history. Not necessarily in the way that we want, but at least to shape it.
So on that note, Mo Ramiz asks, what strategies or changes should left-wing parties consider to rebuild their support and counter the rise of far-right ideology?
Well, firstly, you need not to do what the Democrats did last November or the last 4 years before Trump won. The Democrats, remember, looked at the people in the eye and said, you've never had it so good. And please celebrate the wonderful economic management that we have administered when people were suffering. And Trump turned around and said, I feel your pain. This is carnage. He's been saying this since 2016. So what we need to do is look at the people in the eye, like, people like Bernie Sanders and AOC have been doing, say, we understand, but here is the deal. If you want to change the system which causes you pain, you need to attack the cause of the pain, not the symptom itself. This is not a question of palliative care. This is what we need to do. Firstly, we need to get rid of the financial power of Wall Street. It has happened before. Franklin Roosevelt essentially socialized the banks, and he put the bankers into a mental prison for decades. That's why they hated him. Well, we need to do this. We need to socialize cloud capital. We need to ensure that people like Musk and Jeff Bezos and so on, they realize that there is a mass of people out there who are not going to stand for the public funding of their private techno-feudal empires, that we are going to take over the machines from them, that they didn't build them themselves, they are the result of collective human endeavor, and they have to become the slaves of humanity, not to enslave humanity.
Here's a good question from, where's it gone? I just had it open. One second. Oh, actually, it's an anonymous member, but somebody in the chat says, why are so many of the outlet-owning tech lords like Musk and Bezos and Zuckerberg so invested in anti-Palestinian, pro-Israel speech?
Well, if you look at people like Musk and Thiel and Katz and others, they just look at the roots. They come from the white supremacist South African apartheid regime. There's nothing new there, but it's not just them. If you think of, what did the British do when they approached the southeastern coast of Australia in 1788? The fleet, the first fleet. They looked at the large continent of Australia, where there were about 6 million natives living. They declared it a terra nullius, a land without a people. That's what it means, empty land. And they said, okay, it's ours. That's the first step to genocide. And this is what the Germans did in Namibia. This is what the French did throughout Africa. And the Dutch did in Indonesia. there is a tradition in Europe and amongst white Europeans, whether they are WASPs or Catholics or whatever, there is a tradition of genocide. Therefore, think of the Zionist slogan, a land without a people for a people without a land. So, we are looking at the Palestinians, they're not people. And this is a land without a people, so it's ours because God promised it to us. That's the first step to a genocide, to say that this is a land without, saying that this is a land without a people is the first step to genocide. So in all the historical truth, there is a very close coalescence between the mindset of the European, how was the United States built? It was built by effectively carrying out a massive genocide of Native Americans. So they think, okay, well, we've done that. And you see, when they hear you and me talk about equal political rights from the river to the sea, they get really scared. Because for them, equality is the most potent and threatening word in the English language. Why?
Yes.
Because they know that they live on stolen land. Look at the Australians. 2 years ago, there was a puny little referendum that if it had passed, it would have given the surviving native First Nations, Australians, Aborigines, it would have given the right to have a committee that could advise Parliament on matters concerning the native Australians. And the white Australian and immigrant population voted convincingly against it, because they know that if they do it, they know it's subconscious, but it's there. They're subconscious. That if they acknowledge at all the need for equality, that there hasn't been equality, it's like saying that, you know what, we live on stolen land.
Yeah. Interesting. I do want to, we're almost out of time, but I think since we touched on Gaza and Israel, let me also bring in another big geopolitical issue. Srikant Bundy asks about the Ukraine war. Says several figures on the left are very much supportive of what Putin is doing, arguing that he is opposing Western imperialism, and they welcome Trump's actions to support Putin right now. There is this issue of aggressive NATO expansion. However, is it true Putin is gung-ho against imperialism? What is your view on this, Yanis?
Well, look, what I say to my friends on the left who support Putin, who supported Saddam Hussein in the past, is that, my enemy's enemy is not necessarily my friend, mate.
Well said.
Right? And here, I'm aghast at this situation because I'm constantly being attacked on both sides. You see,
same.
Yeah, I mean, look, I remember 1982, 1981, I was being beaten up with my comrades in London outside the Iraqi embassy because we were demonstrating against Saddam Hussein. Back then, Saddam Hussein was the blue-eyed boy of the West. He was their man in the Middle East. They loved him. Dick Cheney would send him chemical weapons, and he knows that he had them because he kept the receipts, right? And it was we who were demonstrating against him, and we were being described as eccentric, as riffraff and so on, who don't know about the realistic realpolitik and stuff like that. And then when the Americans decided, the coalition of the idiots and the willing, the criminals and so on, the United States and Britain and Australia decided that they're going to go straight in and invade Iraq, we were saying, yes, Saddam Hussein is a monster, but, killing 1 million people through an invasion that will only lead in tears for everyone, including for the United States Army, is not the solution, mate. And they would say, oh, but we need to do something. Well, no, sometimes not doing something is better than doing something which is extremely idiotic. Similarly with Milosevic. I know that Milosevic was anti-communist, I'm a lefty, right? So I knew he was an enemy. But bombing Yugoslavia to smithereens, having the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, bombing Belgrade in the interest of freedom and I don't know what, that was absolute madness. And that, of course, back then I was being accused of being a Milosevic handmaid. No, Milosevic was an enemy, but bombing the Yugoslavs was not the solution. It ushered in all sorts of ills that we still experience in the Balkans. Similarly with Putin. Why do we have to take sides? NATO provoked him. There is no doubt that NATO, not just him, Yeltsin before that, it has broken every agreement not to extend NATO to the borders of Russia. But the fact that he was provoked doesn't mean that he's not a dictator, and it doesn't mean that he had the right to invade Ukraine.
Agreed. I agree with you. I think I've been critical of NATO expansion, but I find it bizarre that people somehow justify an illegal invasion. The same people who rightly opposed, the U.S. illegal invasion of Iraq. I think we should be consistent on both sides. I think there's a lot of hypocrisy to go around when it comes to both the right and the left's approach to Ukraine.
But you see, it's not just hypocrisy. There's something else. It's what Roosevelt said about the dictator of the Dominican Republic. He said he's a bastard, but he's our bastard.
He's our bastard. Yeah.
Right? And therefore, the West never meant its own rhetoric about international law. Never. International law for the West was great and good and should always be respected if it suited them, their interests, their bastards. If it didn't suit them, so for instance, when the ICC, the National Criminal Court, issues a warrant for the arrest of Putin, oh, fantastic, let's do it. And anybody who doesn't participate in getting Putin to The Hague, it does not respect international law. When they do the same thing with Netanyahu, suddenly they whistle in the wind.
Yeah. On that note, let's wrap up there. Thank you for your time. I know it's evening in Greece. Thank you to the more than 150 people who joined the chat from Zeteo subscribers. If you are a paid Zeteo subscriber, you're in this chat, please do let your friends and family know that they can access chats like this. Urge them to become paid subscribers so we can support independent journalism, have conversations like this with Yanis about people like Musk and Thiel and Bezos who don't want us to be having these conversations. Yanis Varoufakis, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much myself.
Thanks, everyone. Did you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support our independent, unfiltered journalism, head over to Zeteo.com. Your support matters.